and they even buy information about you that will sort of complement the information they already have.
Watch The Communicators tonight at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN 2.
Next, Republican Congressman Peter King debating his Democratic challenger, Liuba Grechen Shirley, in New York's 2nd District race. The candidates discuss health care, tax cuts, school safety, and the Mueller investigation. This is About an Hour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Files One News Special. It's a live debate in the race for Congress in New York's 2nd Congressional District. I'm Richard French, and joining me on the stage here tonight in Plainedge High School in North Massapequa, Long Island, are the candidates for the 2nd District, incumbent Republican Peter King and Democrat... and Democrat Liuba Grechen Shirley as well as joining us. Okay. Now this good audience has promised that's the last time we're going to do that till the end. We'll see if we can hold to it. All right, we have agreed to basically rules by both camps here, both candidates. They will have 90 seconds for opening and closing statements. We will alternate questions with candidates getting 90 seconds each for their initial answers. And we also allot me, the moderator here, the opportunity to follow up and ask questions. Those, again, at my discretion. Now, I should mention, we are joined in the crowd tonight by voters in the 2nd District, as you heard, and we've asked them to remain quiet during the debate, no cheering, booing, applause, or any other reactions, so the focus can remain on the candidates in this important set of issues in this very important district. And with that, let's begin. So via coin flip, the first opening statement will be delivered by Mrs. Grechen Shirley.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liuba Grechen Shirley, and I'm running for Congress in New York's 2nd District. I am not a politician. I'm a Long Islander. I'm the mother of 2 small children. I am the daughter of a public school teacher. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants. And I'm an economic development expert. I have an MBA in economics from New York University. I have worked for the United Nations Association and the UN Foundation, and I manage the merger of those 2 multi-million-dollar organizations. I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the Middle East and in Africa, and I have fought to make sure that working families have the opportunities that they need to succeed. And I'm running for Congress because I've had enough. I have had enough of career politicians and millionaires making really bad decisions for the rest of us. Last year, I asked Mr. King if he would hold a town hall meeting, and he told me no, that it would diminish democracy. That is exactly what is wrong with Washington, that we have representatives who are unwilling to do the job. I have spent more than a year crisscrossing this district, talking to people to understand your stories and the issues that affect your lives every day. I have talked to people who cannot pay their grocery bill and buy their prescription medicine in the same week. I know what it's like to argue with your insurance company. And Mr. King has excellent tax-funded payer health care, yet he still voted to take health care away from 74,000 people in our district alone. I have talked to people who are leaving Long Island because they cannot afford the taxes, and despite 25 years in office, Mr. King could not protect us against the tax bill. There are tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires when 50% of Long Islanders will see our taxes go up. It is time for a change. I will fight for working families in this district. It is time for Washington to listen to us.
Mr. King.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank FiOS and Plainedge High School for arranging this. It actually means a lot to me to be here. This is where Eddie Byrne and Brian Moore, 2 outstanding NYPD heroes who were shot in the line of duty. They both graduated from the school, and their families, my thoughts and prayers are always with them. It's great to be here, to join here with all of you. And I just want to, lay out maybe my bio a bit. I was born in Queens, a very blue-collar family. I worked my way through college, worked full-time. Because I got enough money to attend Notre Dame Law School, where I met my wife. We've lived in the same house in Seaford for 47 years over on Roth Road. My daughter was here tonight. She has 2 children. My son, he works in Manhattan. In fact, my wife would be here tonight, but my granddaughter has a toothache, so she had to take her to the dentist. So thanks a lot for that, Erin, keeping Rosemary away from here. But in any event, I've worked in this community. I've been working hard, door to door, for the last 45 years at least in this community, working hard. I was elected to Congress, and since then I have gone out of my way doing everything I possibly can for the people of this district, whether it was 9/11, whether it was Sandy, whether it was getting 9/11 health care, it passed in the first place, extended, and kept through. I've been there. And also, I work across the aisle. I've been selected the most bipartisan member of Congress year after year after year, because I get the job done. I don't stand on ceremony. And also, just for the record, point out, I don't have any government health care. I am not part of any congressional health care plan. I'm the same as everyone else. My wife and I and my children and grandchildren, we're the same as you. We're the neighbors. We've been here. We're going to stay here. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, let's begin the questions. And the first question will go to you, Congressman. This very week, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he's pledged to relitigate the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Now, you voted for this repeal in the past, and there have been nonpartisan estimates that project it would cost billions of dollars if it were to go away to New Yorkers on an annual basis. 2.7 million would lose health insurance. 72,000 people, it's estimated in the 2nd District alone, would be without health insurance by 2026. Why would it be good for New York if the ACA went away?
It wouldn't be. And I made it clear time and again, I supported certain parts of the Affordable Care Act, but there's other parts that are very damaging. For instance, premiums have gone up 105% under the Affordable Care Act. We also have seen almost 5 million people lose their health care coverage. And in some cases, deductibles are so high that it's almost not worth having the health insurance. So there's good parts of it, like Medicaid expansion and also pre-existing conditions. That I support. I voted for the bill in the House to get it out of the House after speaking with, again, almost every hospital and labor union involved in this issue, speaking to the governor of New York. I voted no to get the bill over to the Senate, because hoping that senators like from Ohio and Louisiana and other states would be able to put back the conditions that I thought should be in there, such as pre-existing conditions. When they were not, I made it clear that I would vote against the bill when it came to the House and went through the Senate the way it was. As a result of that, leading hospitals and labor unions took out a full-page ad in Newsday commending me for my leadership on the health care issue. This is not a simple partisan issue where you're for or against it. I believe in trying to work out a compromise, because that's what my career in Congress has been about, being the most bipartisan member of Congress. I wanted the health care bill to be part of that. And unfortunately, the Senate did not pass a good bill. It's not going to pass a good bill. John McCain voted it down. If it come to the House, I would have led the opposition to it, and I believe we would have passed it, because defeated it, because the only reason it passed in the first place is they had like 3 or 4 votes is why it passed. We would have been able to turn that against them.
The same question to you, Ms. Grechen Shirley, but with an addendum is you've gone even further than the ACA. You want Medicare for all. The question is, how practically in this environment is that to even do, and let alone to afford?
So we already spend more money per person on health care than the rest of the developed world. And half of Americans who are in bankruptcy are there because of medical bills. And most of those people had health insurance. They were doing everything right, and they're still in bankruptcy. You want to talk about the cost. We have an incredibly inefficient system. And if the Koch brothers actually put out a study to try to prove that switching to improved and expanded Medicare for all would not be possible for our country. And the study actually proved that it would save $2 trillion over the next 10 years to switch to improved and expanded Medicare for all. And it would insure 30 million more Americans. You want to talk about the savings? The average family would save $5,000. You would no longer be paying your deductibles, your premiums, your co-pays into your employer program. And the small amount that your taxes would go up would be offset by that savings. $5,000 is what the average family would save. It is a simple matter of, do we value the lives of Americans, or do we value the profits of corporate executives? I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to who could not access health care. Every conversation I've had has turned into a healthcare horror story with people in this district. I have spoken with parents who have had to call 65 different doctors to make sure that their children could see a doctor. 65 different doctors. The doctor either wasn't taking their health insurance plan, they weren't taking on new patients. This is a problem I'm sure every one of you has actually had an argument with your insurance company at some point. We're already spending the money, and people are bankrupt because of it. It is a simple matter of what we value.
Just 2 quick points of clarification, one for each. Congressman, if there is, as there was dozens of times in the Obama administration, votes in Congress to repeal without a plan for replace, would you vote yes or no without a clear alternative?
President Obama made it clear he was going to veto it. That was a way to send a signal that it had to be changed. And one of the reasons they have all these problems with doctors who won't accept health insurance is because of Obamacare. because they just won't accept it, and it's made it more difficult for people to get the type of coverage they need. I don't want to go to a European plan. I don't want us to become Europe. I don't want us to be Canada. In Canada, it takes 11 weeks before you can get an MRI, before you can get a specialist. We see what happens in England, the national health care system. We have the best health care system in the world. We have to modify it. We have to work it. We have to correct it. I'm not going to throw it out. I don't want to become Sweden. I don't want to become England. I don't want to become Canada. I want to remain the United States of America.
And Ms. Grechen Shirley, you said you're not crazy about the current plan. You'd rather go with an alternative. But again, if the choices you're faced is retain the status quo or throw it out and try and do something new, what's your choice?
In that case, we make sure that we have the Affordable Care Act. We work to get to improved and expanded Medicare for all. The reality is we don't have the best healthcare system. We have the worst maternal mortality rate in the developed world. And Peter King and his Republican colleagues voted to take maternity coverage away from 13 million American women last year. We have people who are dying because they can't access healthcare. In Canada, if you need to see a doctor, if you have an emergency procedure, if you have something that you're sick, you get in and see a doctor right away. If you have something, an elective procedure, you have a wait time. But we have wait times in this country. We do not have the best healthcare system. We need to make sure that we are insuring Americans and that we are doing it in a cost-effective manner.
I want to get to the next issue, and this obviously dominating the news cycle for the last few days, the subject of Saudi Arabia. I'm sure most of you have been following the story. The latest developments today have been that basically the administration saying, let's give Saudi Arabia a couple more days. While we won't be attending the conference, it's open-ended. A lot of people have been critical of the administration for either, some as the Washington Post reporting, that they're trying to come up with a coherent story, us and the Saudis together. All that said, and this to you, Ms. Shirley, is they're a huge strategic partner in the Middle East. While an imperfect, if even barbaric one at times, are you willing to basically demand regime change or not cooperate with them? Where is the line for you going forward with Saudi Arabia if the allegations, as most believe, will be proven true, that the journalist was murdered in cold blood?
We cannot support a country that murders and chops up a journalist because they disagree with what they're doing. That is not something that we can do as a country, and we need to stand up. And yes, we have a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia. Yes, they are a partner of ours. We need to stand up and hold them accountable. You cannot accept human rights abuses. You cannot accept a government murdering a journalist or murdering anyone. This is something where we need to be strong on. Donald Trump is not being strong on this. Donald Trump is ignoring the problem right now. Somebody died, somebody was murdered, and we are not holding them accountable. We need to make sure that we are holding Saudi Arabia accountable, and we need to be strong on this.
Congressman, same question to you. And again, I want you to put in context where you believe the moral leadership or accountability of the United States starts and stops. The president made it pretty clear. We have big military contracts with the Saudis. I saw Pat Robertson today saying one life shouldn't be worth $100 billion. Where is the line for you as to if the hypothetical is true that the Turkish intel proves that the Saudis coherently, with the blessing of the Crown Prince, tortured and murdered a journalist for an American publication, by the way, or anyone for that matter, with Yemen, et cetera. Where's your line?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt the Saudis did it. Now, who exactly is responsible, we can find out, but to me it's the Saudi government, so they have to all take a hit for that. Let's make it clear. I was the one who led the fight in Congress, who passed the legislation allowing American families who suffered on 9/11 to be able to sue the Saudi government, with no help from the Obama administration, by the way, no help at all. We had to bring it up on the House floor. I led the fight on that and passed over there were too many votes for the president to veto it. He gave us no help at all as far as that. So I have no love for the Saudis at all. At best, they are amoral. We should try to work out a relationship because they are giving tremendous help right now to Israel. They are standing up against Iran. But having said that, we cannot allow this to go unpunished. And if it requires ultimately severing relations, yes, do it. I don't want to do that if we don't have to, but we have to make it clear. I think that the Crown Prince should be removed. That should be our sine qua non. That should be the requirement we impose on them, because the Saudis need us more than we need them. Thank God now we have our own oil supplies. The Saudis can't starve out the world from oil the way they could 30 or 40 years ago. Because of drilling and other, we do have enough oil supplies now. We can stand up to the Saudis. So we have to balance this in a way that works for us. But again, I have no love for the Saudis. They certainly have no love for me, because I led the fight against them on the House floor, working with 9/11 families like Rosemary Kane, who's out here in the audience tonight. Her son was killed on 9/11. I led that fight. I'm proud of it. So I have no love for the Saudis, and they have no love for me, and it's going to continue that way.
But translate for the audience, when we hear the word sanctions, and Senator Graham and others said we're going to lay down sanctions, if they don't remove the Crown Prince, do we still do the military deal with them in terms of the arms contract or not?
We should certainly oppose the sanctions, and as far as the military, I think we can force the Saudis to do it because they depend on our systems for their systems to work. In the end, if it comes to that, no, we cancel it.
Okay, the next subject, obviously, that's been discussed quite a bit in this district is immigration. The first question to you, Congressman, you've been credited with bringing a lot of attention to the MS-13 issue here. You, in fact, even brought the president to the district here, and you've got attention from the Attorney General, and you've brought attention from the federal government. However, just this week, the president said that he would not be opposed to possibly reinstituting family separations. He also talked about deporting dreamers, etc. Are the two wholly separate? Can you embrace the administration on one hand, but yet condemn them on the other? How do you navigate that when we're talking immigration reform with something that obviously people think is a security threat, but at the same time, the same administration does things that you're on record as saying you morally object to?
Well, first of all, if you're bipartisan, you don't condemn people. And I'll point out that the Obama administration deported almost twice as many people as the Trump administration has, and that's almost every year. So let's keep that in some kind of proper perspective. No, first of all, MS-13 is separate from everything. MS-13 is a ruthless gang. These aren't people who are drawn into poverty. They're sent here by people in El Salvador, either sent here on their own or they're sent across the border, and they're taken in by families who are supportive of MS-13. I've worked closely with the district attorney and the police commissioners in both counties. These are murderers, and it's more than just getting attention to it. Because of my efforts, there are now more U.S. attorneys involved, there are more Homeland Security agents, there's more ICE agents, and there's more funding going into the police departments to combat MS-13. Just last week, I was at a fire department event, and a firefighter who also teaches in Brentwood School come up to me and thanked me because the schools are so much safer over the last year. So that I'll lay that out. Now, as far as immigration, I strongly support the building of a wall. At the same time, I've said that if the wall is built and we are secure, that DACA recipients should be allowed to stay in the country. And also as far as TPS, the temporary protective, I have said clearly they should be allowed to stay because we invited them into the country. We shouldn't be putting them out. So this is where you can have a good bipartisan compromise. Back in 2006, when I introduced the bill on the wall, a lot of Democrats voted for it. Now they're against it. But the reality is, I say there can be room for compromise, and it should be done, and I'm going on record as far as DACA, as far as TPS, and also as far as the wall, and I will never let up till MS-13 is crushed and destroyed.
The same question to you, and also clarify what you believe the role of ICE is, and as some Democrats, would you go so far as to disband the agency?
No, I don't support disbanding ICE. There are two parts of ICE. There's the part of ICE that goes after transnational gangs like MS-13. There's the part of ICE that goes after drug traffickers and child traffickers. That part of ICE needs to be secured and strengthened. There's the other part of ICE that is ripping breastfeeding babies away from their mothers and handcuffing their mothers. That part of ICE does need reform. And the people who are at the top of ICE have actually called for reform because the part of ICE that is taking babies away from their parents is making it much more difficult for the ICE agents to do their job when they're going after gangs and traffickers. And the MS-13 problem has grown in the 25 years that Mr. King has been in office. He did bring the president to the district. He missed an important opportunity. I am raising my children here. I am deeply concerned about the threat to our community from MS-13. This is not a partisan issue. Mr. King did not invite Representatives Rice or Swazi. He did not invite County Executive Ballone. He did not, County Executive Laura Kern was given a seat in the audience, not in the table, to actually have a conversation. This needs to be Democrats and Republicans working together to make sure that we have the funding for our law enforcement to do the job to go after MS-13. We also need comprehensive immigration reform. TPS recipients. We have 7,100 temporary protected status recipients in this district. They were the #1 source of information for our police department to tell them what is going on with MS-13 in the community, and now those people are afraid to talk to our police officers because they're concerned that they're going to be deported. I actually went into Mr. King's office to ask that he support the extension of TPS. I brought a stack of petitions from people across the district, and I was told by his staff that he did not support the extension of TPS. We need to support a Clean Dream Act. We need comprehensive immigration reform.
Yeah.
Are we out of time?
No, we're over.
Sorry.
You want to make a quick
I want to make it clear. First of all, you're totally wrong. ICE had nothing to do with taking children away from the mothers. That was not ICE. That was the Border Patrol. So if you're going to go to Congress and you want to be dismantling ICE on a false premise, you're making a terrible mistake, and it will result in blood being spread because of that. ICE does a phenomenal job. And when you're talking about the split in ICE, that was strictly a union matter. Not one person in ICE on either side ever criticized the other. That was strictly a jurisdictional matter as far as union negotiations. So don't spread that kind of rumor around. It's untrue. As far as TPS, I've always supported TPS. I'm on record supporting. I worked with the Diocese of Rockville Center. I've worked with immigrant groups on that. Listen, we can have legitimate arguments. Everyone's entitled to their own interpretation. They're not entitled to their own facts.
Neither of those statements is true. I actually went into Mr. King's office with SEIU to lobby him to ask his staff and Mr. King if they would support the extension of TPS. We were directly told no. We have a recording of it. So that's not true. And in terms of ICE, yes, the top officials in ICE have called for reform. There is a letter. You can look that up as well. There are two parts of ICE.
Nothing to do with the border. Nothing to do with the border.
I didn't say it has to do with the border. It has to do with taking babies away from their parents.
Away from the mothers.
It has to do with taking.
You know what? Wait, I'm gonna jump into this point because I think we can agree that we're going to agree to disagree. All right, the next question, and obviously this has come up since the recent confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, and the first question goes to you, Ms. Grechen Shirley. Roe v. Wade. Do you believe that we are going to see the relitigation now of Roe v. Wade, and specifically, with limits, where do you believe a woman's right to choose starts and stops?
I fully support a woman's right to choose, and yes, I am concerned that we will relitigate it, and it's something that we need to stand up for. Abortions will continue to happen. It's a question of whether or not they're going to be safe. We need to trust women to make the best decisions for their bodies. We need to trust them to work with their doctors, not the government. 99% of abortions take place early, before 20 weeks. The late-term abortions that we're talking about are for the life of the woman or the child, and that is a scientific fact. These are not women who wake up and decide, hey, I want to have an abortion later. It's because there is a medical reason for having an abortion at that point. I fully support Planned Parenthood. Mr. King has actually voted to take funding away from Planned Parenthood 17 times. He is against a woman's right to choose, even in the cases of rape or incest, and has actually supported jailing doctors who perform abortions with murder. We need to trust women to make the best decisions for our bodies and our families with the support of our doctors, not our government. And I would like to know, Mr. King, why you do not trust women to make the best decisions for our bodies.
Please, just one second. Before that, I asked everyone in the audience, please withhold all reaction from the audience till the end. Congressman, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have made it clear since I first ran for office, I am pro-life. I do believe that the unborn child is entitled to protection. As a practical matter, I think the most you would see as far as going after Roe versus Wade, which, by the way, even most law professors believe was wrongly decided as far as the way it was done. But having said that, I can't see limitations being put on it. That's the most you're going to see, I believe, over the next 4, 5, 10 years. If society evolves beyond that, we'll see. But that's the reality on that. But if you're talking about the Judge Kavanaugh hearings, I would have no problem at all if the Democratic members of the committee or the pro-choice members of the committee, if they wanted to question Judge Kavanaugh and go into a discussion on the legalities of Roe versus Wade, what the precedents are, how it looks going forward, what's going to be coming up in the circuit courts and the district courts. That is all fair comment. But for them to go after him the way they did and presume him guilty before there was any evidence at all, to me that was so atrocious and outrageous. And people who were so worried because people coming in from Sudan were denied their rights at the airport, they didn't give a damn about the rights of Judge Kavanaugh up there, willing to throw away the presumption of anything. So quite frankly...
allow the congressman to finish, please. You still have another 30 seconds if you'd like.
Okay, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Anyway, it sort of proves my point. What I'm saying here is that I try to be consistent, and whether I agreed or disagreed with Judge Kavanaugh, I would not be presuming him guilty when there was no any corroborating evidence whatsoever, none at all, and that is wrong. And that, to me, is why so many people in a recent poll, 58% of independents said they thought he was treated badly.
Since we're talking about Kavanaugh, since we're talking about Kavanaugh, I wasn't intending to go there yet, but it's now been opened. I go to you, Ms. Grechen Shirley. What about that? Some people argued While this wasn't a criminal trial, there's a presumption of guilt on him. Conversely, overwhelmingly, women took issue with the hearings. If you look at the polls, where do you come down on the judge? Even if you didn't agree with his politics, do you believe he was treated fairly?
I believe that this was not a criminal trial. There was not the point of the testimony, the point of these hearings was not to determine whether or not Judge Kavanaugh was guilty or innocent. It was a job interview to determine whether or not he was the best candidate for the job. And had anybody behaved that way in a job interview, you would clearly determine that they were not the best candidate. When there are that many concerns about whether or not he is telling the truth, when he is attacking senators and crying and yelling in the middle of a testimony, it is clear that he is not the best position. He's not the best candidate for that job. This is a Supreme Court justice, somebody who needs to be calm, somebody who needs to be bipartisan, somebody who needs to have good judgment. He was not there to determine whether or not he was innocent or guilty. He was there to determine whether or not he was the best candidate for that position. And this is a much larger question. It is a question of whether we believe women, whether we trust women, whether we respect women. And I do believe Dr. Blasey Ford, and to see what happened to her, to see what happened in the questioning and the way that she was treated, that is why so many assault survivors do not come forward. We need to trust women and believe them.
Very quickly, yeah.
Very quick. First of all, I thought Dr. Ford was treated very well. In fact, Republicans had a female prosecutor come in, talk to her, ask her questions. There was nothing at all treated. The one who was treated badly was Judge Kavanaugh. And if you're surprised that he showed emotion, if you're accused of gang rape, if you were the media of the country talking about gang rape and Democratic senators enabling that type of slander, of course he's going to show emotion. Any decent person would. If he didn't show emotion, that would show he was indecent and probably guilty.
Okay, I have a question. We have the midterms obviously in less than 3 weeks. And to that end, I have an individual question for both, as the voters of the 2nd District will be heading to the polls. First, for you, Congressman. Mm-hmm. This week, the president said to voters, hey, when you go into the voting booth, think of me when you're voting. Pretend like I'm on the ballot. And by the way, he said, if they lose, it's not my fault. But to that point, do you want the voters of the 2nd District to attach you and the president? How do you want your constituents to think, and what should they measure? Should the president, in effect, like he said, be on the ballot for you when they go vote?
First of all, I want people to judge me on my record. I'm proud of my record. It's an independent record. I support President Trump on issues like MS-13. I support him on ISIS, where he's crushing the ISIS caliphate in the Middle East. I support the way he defends the police against groups like Black Lives Matter that are attacking him. So I fully support the president on that. On Russia, I've gone publicly and said I disagree with the moral equivalency he suggests there. So when I believe he's right, I support him. When I think he's wrong, I speak out. Same as I did with President Clinton, with President Bush, and President Obama. I'm independent. I represent the voters of this district. That's why, again, I fought so hard to get the $61 billion for Sandy relief. The highest offer on the table was $27 billion. I got 61. Chuck Schumer and I working together got that through. On the 9/11 health care bill, when people in the Bush administration, specifically Mick Mulvaney, the budget director from South Carolina, who I have no use for, Mick Mulvaney, he tried to change the law so that, in effect, you'd be denying people the benefits they're entitled to the 9/11 health care bill. I stood up to the administration. I even met with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart and I held a news conference, and also with Anita Lowy and with Jerry Nadler and Carol Maloney. We led the fight against that. We defeated the administration on that. So I am independent, and whether it was the Bush administration that I opposed on to buy ports, whether it was the Obama administration, where I really was disappointed they gave us no support in going after Saudi Arabia. And by the way, President Obama signed the biggest arms deal ever with Saudi Arabia. So we should keep this in a nonpartisan discussion here. So no, judge me on my record. And again, when I'm with the president, I certainly voted for him over Hillary Clinton. I'll be voting for him, I assume, over Elizabeth Warren, whoever it is, in 2020.
But when they go in, don't think about Trump when they're deciding who they're voting for. Yes, sir.
What's that now?
Do you want them thinking about Trump when they go in there or not?
Put it in perspective as to what. Yeah, think of Donald Trump on MS-13. Think of him on ISIS. Think of the way he stands with the cops. But as far as other issues, look at me. I'm the one that's running.
This question for you. Please, everybody. We're not going to get to as much if we keep doing this. This question to you, Ms. Grechen Shirley. We saw in another district, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez pull off a huge upset. Joe Crowley expected to sail to victory. Now he's going to be looking for a different job in November. Since then, there have been moments where a fair estimation is she has not been ready for prime time, and her messages have been beyond even what a lot of mainstream Democrats feel comfortable with. To that end, where do you feel you fall in the political spectrum for Democrats? In some ways, this year is like a Tea Party defining moment for the Democratic Party, where it was several years ago for the Republicans. Do you align yourself with her policies? Do you feel comfortable if someone says socialist? Where are you on the political spectrum?
No, I am definitely not a socialist, and I am I'm fighting for working families in this district. And this is something that I need to make clear. I was never planning on running for office. Every time Mr. King gets up here and says he's bipartisan, you should look at his voting record, because he votes with Donald Trump and the Republican Party 85% of the time. He votes against labor 60% of the time. He voted to take health care away from 74,000 people in our district, did not protect us against the tax bill, where half of us will see our taxes go up. He's voted against paid family leave, equal pay for work for women, and he has voted to let coal companies dump waste into our waters. He's against, he actually supports having Muslim Americans be under surveillance. He is against marriage equality. These are not bipartisan issues. These are extremist viewpoints. And I am running because I don't agree with these extremist viewpoints. I am sick and tired of giving tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires at the expense of hardworking Long Islanders. So I cannot put myself on a spectrum. I am concerned about our economy. I am an economic development expert. I have worked all over the world to make sure that our economies are strong, and I am concerned about what is happening right here in my home. I have seen the cost of housing go up. I have seen the cost of education increase. Our taxes have consistently increased in the 25 years that Mr. King has been in office, and our wages have stayed stagnant. So I am fighting for working people in this district to make sure that you are heard. I am not taking a dime of corporate PAC money, and we still outraise Mr. King by more than $500,000 because everyone in this district wants to make sure that their voice is heard, not the voices of corporations and special interests.
And that's time. All right. The next question. We both did. Go ahead. Sure.
Yes, about Cortez. And yes, no. First of all, to say I'm against labor, tell that to the labor people here and all the building trade unions and endorsements. I have an excellent labor record. Also, as far as Octavia Cortez, yes, she's not ready for prime time. For instance, she was talking about having...
Guys, please, if we don't give it now, we're not going to get questions. The idea was that you each got an individual question, not on something different. I want to get to the next issue, which is the subject of impeachment. And I'd love to know from both of my candidates, if several things happen, where the line in the sand would be. And I'll start with you first. What do you believe as a Democrat? I've heard some people call for impeachment before the Mueller probe's even over. I heard some people say, Democrats, that there's already seen evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. We've heard reports without confirmation that certainly not before the midterms, but after the midterms, maybe in the beginning of the year, a report would be filed. Do you have a line, or do you have to wait until the findings to see if you believe this president is unfit for office?
I want to see what the Mueller investigation concludes. There is no reason to have the discussion about impeachment until the investigation is finished. We need to make sure that Mueller is able to finish his investigation without any interference from the government. I am not running because of Donald Trump. And there are a lot of Democrats who are running because they're angry about Donald Trump. I am running because I am angry that we have such inequality in our country, such inequality in our district. Every time I go out and knock on doors, I hear stories of people working multiple jobs to make ends meet. That is what people in our district are concerned about. They're concerned about taxes and health care and making sure their children get a good education. People are not concerned right now about whether or not Donald Trump is going to be impeached. Let Mueller finish his investigation, and then we can have that discussion.
There's one point I want to be clear on, though. If the Democrats take back the House, they'll have subpoena power. Do you believe before the conclusion of the Mueller probe, they should exercise their subpoena power and call witnesses as it relates to the Russia probe, even if the Mueller investigation isn't finished?
I think we should wait for the Mueller investigation.
Okay. Congressman, to the same question, there has been widespread speculation that both the Attorney General and even Rod Rosenstein may be relieved of their jobs in an effort to stifle the probe. If that were to happen, what would your reaction be?
Again, first of all, I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I've listened to almost all the witnesses in the case. I am telling you, as of now, from what I've seen, and I've probably been there for 40 or 50 of the witnesses, including all of the key witnesses, there was absolutely no evidence at all of any type of high crime or misdemeanor, anything at all that would warrant impeachment. If Mueller comes out with something, fine. Don't believe the newspaper stories. President Trump has cooperated more with this special counsel than anyone ever has. Millions of documents have been turned over. He allowed his own counsel to go in, which he could have called attorney-client privilege, meant for 30 hours with the Mueller probe. No, there's no evidence at all. But, you know, if you're talking about taxes going up, that's going up because of local government, not because of the federal government. I've never voted for a tax increase in Congress since I've been there, and there's been really the last tax increase in Congress was Bill Clinton's back in 1994, I think. So we have not had tax increase at the federal level. Tax increase comes here at the local level, and that we should work to alleviate. But again, I would just say this talk of impeachment is so dramatic. I voted against Bill Clinton's impeachment because I believe that the office of the presidency, that is following an election, the most sacred ritual we have here in the United States is electing a president. If he's elected, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, unless there's substantial reason to even be talking about impeachment, is wrong. So no, as of now, I would say I would not, based on everything I've seen. If Mueller has more and more comes out, obviously I will treat it the same as I would.
Fair enough. But if there is a move, a modern-day Saturday Night Massacre that you're obviously familiar with in the Nixon years, what then?
First of all, that's a presumption. Obviously, if the president is obstructing justice, I would take action. There's no evidence of that at all. This is all newspaper talk. There's no evidence at all that this president did anything at all. In fact, he put up with Jim Comey a lot longer than I would have, because what Comey is saying publicly is totally different from what he ever told us privately. When he told us there was absolutely no evidence at all against President Trump as an individual.
Different subject. You just mentioned about raising taxes, and that you certainly haven't done that at the federal level. This week, we've gotten messaging from both the administration and Republican leadership that they're talking about 5% cuts across the board for all agencies. They would include cuts to Social Security, Medicare, popular programs. You've always been an advocate of being the pay-go party. If there's a cut in taxes, you find the savings for it. You've seen the spikes in both annual deficits and to the national debt. How do you reconcile the huge debt that we've racked up here in the last 2 years, and more than that, now calls after a tax cut to pay for it with cuts in part to Social Security and Medicare?
Specifically, the only time I recall ever being a vote to cut back on Social Security and Medicare was last year's budget bill. I voted against it. And it was a Republican budget. I voted against it because of the cuts to Social Security and Medicare. As far as we're talking about the effects of the tax cuts, right now, even here in Long Island, there is a dramatic increase in sales tax because of the booming economy. There's more jobs, less unemployment than ever before. So right now it's working. And the same thing they're talking about the deficit was what they said under Ronald Reagan. The fact is, Ronald Reagan, they were saying he was going to bankrupt the country. At the end of Reagan's term, there were 18 million jobs being created. We defeated the Soviet Union. We rebuilt the military. And the deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product was the same at the end as it was at the beginning. So if the economy is growing, that offsets the deficit. Should we have cuts in spending? Absolutely. We should start reducing spending. But I would never vote to cut Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid.
The same question to you, and more specifically, you've seen national polling, and while the president may be underwater, when it comes to the economy, he's getting largely high marks. People have approved largely of the tax cut. I'm curious, if you were in Congress, would you have voted for or against the tax cut?
Against.
And what do you give as the state of the economy?
This tax bill gave 80% of the benefits to the top 1% of people in this country. Mr. King said he was in basic agreement with the tax bill. He said there was nothing wrong with cutting taxes on the wealthy. The reality is that when you cut taxes on the top 1% of people in our country, we have less money to invest in health care, in education, and in infrastructure. And now the Republicans are coming after Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. The reality is that when Mr. King voted to repeal the ACA, he actually did vote to cut Medicaid and Medicare. And in 1995, he supported privatizing Social Security. Social Security is not an entitlement. It is an earned benefit. Every single one of you pays into Social Security. Since the very first job that you got, maybe in high school, you have been paying into Social Security. So to think that our government wants to come after your Social Security, it is an investment that you have made in yourself because they want to pay for tax cuts on the top 1%. When you have tax cuts on corporations, permanent tax cuts on corporations, you have more money in the hands of corporate executives. They go out and buy yachts. When you have real tax cuts for working Americans, we buy groceries. We start small businesses. We are the job creators. And that is a reality. And so when you cut taxes on the wealthy, we have a deficit. Mr. King supported increasing our deficit $1.5 trillion. Our deficit right now is twice what it was when Paul Ryan took over as Speaker of the House, twice. And who is going to pay for that? Our children. Our children are going to pick that up so that we can have tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. That is not how you strengthen our economy. That is not how you make sure that our families are secure. And I would vote against this tax bill. I think we need to reform taxes and make sure that working Americans get tax cuts.
Okay. The next question I want to ask is on the subject of guns. And we did a town hall meeting at this very high school on the same stage after yet another of those tragic school shootings. I'm curious, and I'll start with you, Ms. Gretchen. Where the current laws stand, not just in New York State, but on the national level, what should be different than we have right now? And where do you believe the next time we have this conversation, so we don't have the same rinse and repeat to it, what needs to change in this country after the next massacre?
Something needs to change in this country now before there is a next massacre. That is exactly what is wrong with our gun policies right now. We need universal background checks. 90% of Americans want universal background checks, yet it was almost 20 years ago that the last clean vote on background checks actually came up. And that is because Mr. King continues to support and vote for Republican leadership who is bought and owned by the NRA, so they don't let these bills come up. Mr. King will consistently say that he supports universal background checks, but the last time there was a clean vote, he voted against background checks at gun shows. So you can walk into a gun store, fail a background check, and then walk right over to a gun show and legally buy that weapon. That does not keep us safe. Mr. King also supports having transfer of gun ownership between friends and family without background checks. That is effectively a straw purchase. We have children who are dying in schools. My mother is a public school teacher and has called me crying from her desk in the middle of a lockdown drill. That is what we're doing to our teachers. That is what we're doing to our students. My daughter will be 5 next year, and she's going to have to learn what a lockdown drill is. That needs to change. We need a real assault weapons ban. We need to ban bump stocks. And every responsible gun owner will agree with you on this. Mr. King put his name on a March for Our Lives rally in Farmingdale. And instead of being there to talk to students and to take this seriously, he went down to Florida for spring training for the Mets. That is not the type of leadership that we need.
Okay, if we're talking about leadership, and this offends some of my Republican friends, it is my bill they're talking about. It's the King-Thompson bill on background checks, which also applies to gun shows. So I'm on the line. I go against my party. I go against the NRA. It's an issue we disagree on, and I'm out there. I don't hide. I don't say one thing one place and something somewhere else. I also am the one who introduced the bill to ban anyone on the terrorist watch list from being able to purchase a gun. I voted for the assault weapon ban 20 years ago. There's a reason why Michael Bloomberg was putting $80 million into Democratic campaigns is supporting me, because we agree on the gun issue. So I'm out there. I'm willing to take the hit on that, and I do it. And it doesn't make many friends for me within the Republican Party of Washington, but I believe strongly in this. So I think it's wrong to be distorting someone's record. And again, as far as gun shows, I'm always on record against that. I am the one, again, it's my bill. The Democrats adopted my bill. I'm not that crazy of Nancy Pelosi endorsing my bills, but she did. She made that the Democratic position. So again, it's a sign of my independence that I work across the aisle. There's no way you can categorize me one way or the other. It's a consistent philosophy of being honest and independent and doing what I believe is best for the district, and also working very closely with the police departments who also support this legislation. So again, there's no need to distort a record. We can have an honest debate. If you have a variation of my bill, if you want to make an amendment to the King-Thompson bill, go ahead and do it. If you don't agree with me on the terrorist watch list, say that. But the fact is, I'm out there, I'm in there casting the votes, fighting hard, doing what I have to do, even when it turns off people in my own party, because my obligation is to the voters of this district. It always has been, always will be, and will continue to be.
A question just for both to clarify. Do you believe that teachers should be armed?
No. Teachers, sorry, can I answer that and respond? No. Teachers are already teachers. They're social workers. They're guidance counselors. To also ask a teacher to hold a weapon and be a security guard is crazy. Teachers want to go to school to teach. They do not want to go to school and carry a gun to protect their students. We need to make sure that students and teachers have the resources that they need, not that they have more guns in their classroom, because a teacher is not able to take a gun and actually keep their children safe. Imagine what that would be like. Imagine the fear. Imagine the responsibility. That is not something that we should be charging our teachers with. But I'm sorry?
Okay.
Well, most teachers do not want to do it. And it is not safe, and you are not trained to carry guns.
So, let's, Mr. King, same question to you.
Can I just...
I'm trying... Congressman, same question. Would you like to see teachers armed?
I would leave it up to the local school boards. My own instinct is if a person is licensed, if a person is skilled, let's say a former police officer who is now working as a teacher, and the school board authorizes it, yes. But I would not require any teacher to do it. And I would much rather have professionals, certainly police officers or others who are trained to be security guards. But if a teacher, for instance, someone in the school had a gun in Florida, they could have saved lives. But only if they're qualified, only if the school board approves it. That should never be anything at all which comes from Washington. If a local school district has somebody in there who is an expert with weapons and they feel it would protect the kids, yes. But again, it's not something I'm advocating.
May I respond to just one point?
I want to get to, I'm sorry,
Okay.
just the next few. The next question I have is the subject of experience. And I'll start with you, Congressman. Like your opponent mentioned, you've been around for a quarter century. To this point, I'm not trying to date you. To this point, New York has not done as well as other states under this administration. Certainly, the tax bill didn't do any favors for property taxes for folks here. And I know you voted against it. But how do you respond to someone who says, A, maybe we should term limit lawmakers, and B, a vote for a Republican in a blue state is against that state's interests because at the end of the day, the administration sometimes, if not often, looks at it as a red and blue equation?
No, it's not. For instance, when Al D'Amato was in the Senate, he certainly fought hard for New York and got results. And no, listen, as far as experience, some experience is good, some experience is bad. My experience is very good. If you want to talk what I've done for New York, I don't know if any congressman ever on Long Island has done more for his district and more for Long Island than I have. If you want to go to 9/11, you want to go to Sandy, you want to go to 9/11 healthcare, we can go through a whole list of things, even as far as taxes. Everyone is so critical, at least on the stage, of the Trump record. I have serious difference with President Trump, certainly on property tax. But, you know, all of these horribles she talks about, how bad the economic situation is, how bad health care was, that followed 8 years of Barack Obama. After 8 years of Barack Obama, the country was in bad shape. Long Island was in bad shape. Since in the last year, we have more jobs in Long Island than ever before, more revenues coming in. Even as Newsday said, and they're no friends of mine, they said the Nassau County executive was able to submit a budget without a tax increase because of the sales tax revenues are going up because of the increased jobs here in Long Island. So let's keep this in some kind of perspective and not just be saying that everything is bad for Long Island. Now, on the tax bill, I did fight against it, and I continue to fight against it. As soon as that bill passed, Congresswoman Nita Lowey and I introduced legislation, bipartisan legislation, to reinstate SALT. We will continue that fight, and we will do it. And again, on balance, I was strongly opposed because what I was going to do in Long Island, it would have been a lot worse. At least 10,000 was put in. That was because of my efforts, but it's not enough. We need at least 30 or 40,000 put in as the amount of deduction. Some fights you win, some you lose. I'll put my win-loss record against anybody. Anyone in the Congress, certainly anyone from Long Island.
So on the subject, Ms. Grechen Shirley, on experience, some people who've been critical of the president said he never held elected office. He never stepped foot in Washington, and he didn't know how the city operated, let alone the institution. You have never held elected office either. Why should voters feel comfortable with on-the-job training given the stakes that are going on?
So the experience that I have is different from the experience Mr. King has. I have worked all over the world. I have worked with farmers, I have worked with diplomats, I have worked with presidents, I have managed the merger of multi-million-dollar organizations, I have built coalitions, and I have made sure that working families have the opportunities that they need. That is my experience. I have 17 years of experience building strong economies and helping people improve their livelihoods. If you want to talk about Mr. King's record, he blocks people from Facebook if you ask him a question. That is ridiculous.
Okay.
If you ask a question on his voting record or any policy, if you do not agree with Mr. King, he blocks you from his Facebook page. He has not had a debate with any challenger in 8 years. This is the first debate, and it's only because we are raising the money and we have built a grassroots movement. When you have a job as a representative and you are too afraid to meet with your constituents, Mr. King was asked about a week ago about the town hall that I organized, and hundreds of people showed up to it, and we talked about the issues. And he said he would not succumb to mob rule. He said that a week ago. He's still not learned the lesson that this is not about mob rule, that this is what democracy is, speaking to your constituents. If you do not know what is happening in the district, if you are not present in the district, if you're not speaking and meeting with your constituents, you cannot do the job. If you talk about his record, he has voted consistently against the Environmental Environmental Protection Agency. He supported leaving the Paris Accord. I thank you for bringing money for Hurricane Sandy, but it's 6 years later and people are still not back in their homes. The homes are still being razed and people have had to leave Long Island. These storms are increasing, they're severe, and if we don't actually take on climate change, we're not going to protect Long Island.
I'm running out of time here. I only have a couple things left. So, and you can use part of your time to answer however you wish, but we've all seen, I don't care what party you are, just how toxic things are. You can't have a dinner conversation without politics getting up and temperature, at least that I haven't seen. And I'm not being Pollyannish. We've always argued, but not like we have lately. Where do you put the responsibility? Is this a shared, equal responsibility? Does one person bear more of it? Congressman, where do you put it, and where realistically do we think we have any reason to think a year from now it'll be any better?
Again, I can speak for myself. When I'm the most bipartisan member of Congress, obviously, I'm not adding to the toxicity. You can add to the toxicity, though, by spreading false stories, by saying the wrong thing. No one has met with more constituents than I have. You set up a meeting. I'm not going to go to one of your meetings, because you set it up.
I was one of your constituents.
Right.
I wasn't challenging you.
And I have 700,000 constituents. You're one of them, and you only moved back in the district last year. So there's others that come before you. You talk to these labor unions. You talk to these labor unions. How often I go out to the union halls to meet with them. You talk to Tom Suozzi. He and I held public hearings on immigration, on business. You talk about a town hearing. I was there in Central Islip after those 4 kids were murdered. And I was there with Tim Cini, who was then the police commissioner. We sat there for over 2 hours meeting with those. That was raw emotion. That wasn't a phony, contrived political meeting. That was real people, not people parachuting in from Manhattan trying to create issues. They were real people who were losing their kids, were being slaughtered. And I went there. We answered every question. We worked together. And as a result of that, now you have more U.S. attorneys. You have more money in there. And MS-13 is on the run. So I go to real meetings, and I've gone to many of them. I've met with every constituent. You're talking about during the health care bill. I've met with virtually every labor union, immigrant group, church leaders from all different religions, also with every hospital leader, hospital CEOs, nurses, doctors, people who suffered from various illnesses. That's why, again, so many of these groups have honored me and thanked me. That's why a full-page ad was taken out in Newsday by hospitals and unions praising me for being a real leader, not a showboat, not trying to show up at meetings to create trouble, but actually sitting down and discussing real issues with real people, and I'll continue to do it. Go
ahead. Real quickly, we're limited time, guys. Go ahead.
I was born and raised in this district. 5 generations of my family have lived in this district, and I am raising my children in this district. So if you want to call me a carpetbagger, it's not true. He can say it, but it's not true. I was born and raised here.
So you're an absentee.
Not an absentee. I was born and raised here. My entire family has lived here for 5 generations.
How about you?
May I finish, please? I was a constituent of Mr. King's, and I asked him multiple times to meet, and he refused. I have spoken with thousands of people across this district who had the exact same experience. He refuses to come to meetings if, God forbid, he be challenged on his voting record. And if you want to talk about your support for labor, he has a 40% rating from the AFL-CIO. That means that 60% of the time he votes against labor. I actually went to the AFL-CIO congressional night, and I was told that he hasn't been there in 12 years, because the last time he went, somebody questioned his voting record and he didn't like it. And that is the problem with Washington. That is the problem with representatives, because they don't want to actually be held accountable for their voting record. If Mr. King met with his constituents, I probably would not be running for office right now. But he refused to meet with me, and he refused to meet with you, and it was very clear to me that his voting interests are who he votes for is his corporate PACs. We have an affordable housing crisis, but he takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the real estate industry. We have an opioid crisis. He takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the pharmaceutical company. Almost 50% of Mr. King's campaign contributions come from corporate PACs. That's who he's voting for.
Okay, wait, guys, I got you. Time out. I got 2 minutes, so we got to wrap it. You use your. All right, hold on one second. All right, here we go. Can I ask a question that I think a lot of. Why do you want to do this? I just asked about a toxicity, and look, right? But I'm being serious. A lot of your colleagues have decided to retire. A lot of people don't want to do this job. And please, I'm not looking for, I want to change the world. I get it. But seriously, you're going into an environment where less than 10% of the public likes your vocation. Honestly, with how polarized and tribalized things are, seriously, Congressman, why do you want to keep doing this?
because I want to fight for the people that I represent. I've lived in this district for over 50 years. My children were raised here. My wife taught in the schools here. My grandchildren are here today. My daughter is in politics here on Long Island. We care about this community. It means a lot to me, and I'm going to continue to fight, and I get results. I saw what it meant when I walked the South Shore after Sandy and saw those people where their homes were destroyed, knowing that maybe not everyone's taken care of, 95% are because of me. They're back in their homes, and the homes have been rebuilt because of my efforts. Because the 9/11 families were not being taken care of, I stood with them, got them the funding they were entitled to afterward under the Victims' Compensation Fund. What I've done for 9/11 health care, people who have the worst illnesses. I'd be at local ball games seeing people in their 30s who could barely breathe because they worked at Ground Zero. I was the one who stood up to my administration, stood up to the Speaker of the House, stood up to everyone to make sure that they got the health care they're entitled to.
Same thing, 1 minute. Honestly, why?
I have 2 children. They're 2 and they're 4, and I am deeply concerned about the country that they are growing up in. And I am deeply concerned about every other child and what they're growing up seeing. We have a mass incarceration problem in this country. We have rising sea levels. We have children who are graduating with tens of thousands of school loan debt. We have corporations that are making exorbitant amounts of money while people in our district and all across the country are working 3 jobs to put food on the table. These are issues that concern me. I want to make sure that my children grow up in a country where it doesn't matter what your gender is, your sexual identity, your race, your income, your religion, that every single American has a fighting chance to build a good life for their family. Okay. That is why I'm running for office.
All right, we're now at the point of closing statements. With the coin flip, Ms. Grechen Shirley, you deliver the first closing statement.
Thank you, everyone. This campaign has always been about the grassroots. It has been about listening to people all across this district, because for too long, you haven't been listened to. For 25 years, since I was 12 years old, Mr. King has been in office, and he has become complacent. And that's what's wrong right now. We need to make sure that we have a representative who will hold a town hall every month so that everybody can come and ask open questions. I guarantee you that I will hold a town hall every month. We have real problems in this district. There are wonderful people who want to build strong lives for themselves, and every time I knock on someone's door, the first issue I hear is healthcare, then taxes, then education, and then the environment. It should not matter what zip code you were born into, what kind of school you get. Right now, if you were born in Amityville or Massapequa, your education is very different. Every school should have the same resources. We need to make sure that our children have the best start to life, that they have the education that they need. We need to make sure that people have access to health care. We need to make sure that people have access to good paying jobs. And these are issues that affect every one of your lives. And I have taken the time over the last year to sit down and listen to you, to hold town halls, to hold roundtable meetings, to make sure that I understand the issues that affect your lives. I was born and raised in this district. I am raising my children in this district. I am deeply concerned about what is happening, and I know that we can do better. And that is why I'm running for office, and I promise you that I will always vote for you, that I will never take a dime from corporate PACs, that every contribution will be from individuals so that we actually make sure that your voice is being heard.
Mr. King.
I am absolutely dedicated to this district. I think last year it took off a total of 5 days. I meet with everyone who is in a responsible position to make friend and foe, including many groups who are against me. I'll meet with them. And that's my way I've done throughout, being out there with the people, which is why I think I've been re-elected so many times. As far as having debates, I've debated every time there's been a debate in the race. I've been there. Last 2 years, there was no debate. Nobody asked for one. I've been in a number of debates over the years and will always debate my opponents. Why not? I have a good record. I'm proud of my record. But I will also say that many of the things that she complains about, this is after 8 years of Barack Obama. Right now, the economy is doing much better. People are working. We have actually a shortage of labor because there's so many jobs available. The economy is doing so well in Long Island that county executives can avoid tax increases because of the improved economy. That's because of what we're doing in Washington. But also, let me just say that I am so dedicated to this district, and I will continue to work for it. But at the same time, I do want to bring people together. You were the one in your campaign where your opponent in the primary accused you of having racists in your campaign against him as an African American. You had Steve Israel, who was neutral, the former head of the Democratic Campaign Committee, who came out against you, even though he didn't want to take a stand because of your position against Israel on the boycott. Now, this isn't me. These are your Democratic opponent in one case. The other is a neutral Democratic chairman who said you were anti-Israel. Your position was anti-Israel. So I do bring people together. I don't divide them. I ran against Dwayne Gregory 2 years ago. Nobody raised a race issue against me. I treat people the way they are. I treat them for what they are. I will continue to do that. I believe in equality. I believe in standing with people. I also believe in standing with America. I don't want us to become Europe. I want us to remain more America than ever before.
And that is going to do it. All right. Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for the audience for tuning in and the audience here in person all the time we have tonight. Thank you to both our candidates here, Republican Congressman Peter King and Democratic challenger Liuba Grechen Shirley. Also, thank you as well. And please, everybody, get out to vote on November 6th. Thank you, Plainhead High School.